Most people nowadays view the robber barons as successful businessmen, industrial pioneers, and philanthropists. However, the people back then viewed them as mean and ruthless businessmen who would do anything to succeed. These people created some of the first monopolies. An example is John D. Rockefeller and oil.
The documentary is about Cornelius Vanderbilt, John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, and Leland Stanford.
Cornelius Vanderbilt was a self-made multimillionaire who became one of the wealthiest Americans of the 19th century. He was born on May 27, 1794, on Staten Island, New York. He died on January 4, 1887. He died in New York City. As a boy, he worked with his father, who operated a boat that ferried cargo between Staten Island, New York, and Manhattan. Eventually, he acquired a fleet of small boats and learned about ship design. After working as a steamship captain, Vanderbilt went into business on his own in the late 1820s. After creating new routes to travel goods using steamships, he was super successful, especially after creating a route through Nicaragua to California. In the 1860s, after the Civil War, Vanderbilt shifted his focus from shipping to the railroad industry, which was entering a period of expansion. He gained control of a number of railway lines operating between Chicago and New York and established an interregional railway system.
John D. Rockefeller started off as a small oil business owner, struggling to make enough money to support his family. Now, until the king of trains, Cornelius Vanderbilt, offered him a deal to supply him oil, Rockefeller knew that this was an opportunity to make himself rich. Even though at first he could only barely fill Vanderbilt's orders, he slowly started to gain money and power. Eventually he gained so much power that Vanderbilt and other train companies wanted to change their deals. So, Rockefeller invented the idea of transporting oil through pipes. He also shut down the Pittsburgh oil refinery because his pipeline didn't reach from New York City to Pittsburgh and he didn't want to use a train. By shutting down the Pittsburgh refinery, a lot of the train systems and a lot of oil refineries failed and tried to sell their companies before they lost money. John D. Rockefeller then bought up a lot of the oil refineries. After that, he owned around 90% of oil refineries in America. Later on, his company, Standard Oil, went to trial and he had to split it up into 37 different companies.
Andrew Carnegie started as a poor Irish immigrant. He had to start working as an assistant to Tom Scott, the president of a rival railroad company to Vanderbilt named the Pennsylvania Railroad. As Carnegie aged, Scott moved him through the company and promoted manager. Scott wanted Carnegie to build a bridge to connect east to west. The problem is that there isn't a material strong enough to build such a massive bridge. So Carnegie gets the idea to use steel to build the bridge. Steel is not very well mass-produced and is very expensive. He spends years searching for a way to mass-produce steel. Finally, he finds a way to get the steel and starts construction on the bridge. He comes into a massive debt, although once he has built the bridge, he gets tons of steel orders. He didn't have enough steel to fill the orders, so he started a steel mill, which eventually amassed into a huge company called Carnegie Steel.
J.P. Morgan is known as the banker of the late 19th century. He invested in startup businesses now known as General Electric, U.S. Steel, and his own bank, J.P. Morgan Co. To get General Electric away from Thomas Edison, who had bad press at the time, he bought enough shares of the company from Edison to become majority leader of the company, and he eventually kicked out Edison out of his own company, which is now known as GE. After he made enough money from the electric industry, he decided to buy Carnegie Steel from Andrew Carnegie for $480 million, $310 billion today. That's more than the entire U.S. federal government's budget at the time. He changed the name to U.S. Steel, and the company is still around today. J.P. Morgan was a revolutionary businessman and leader in the electric, steel, and banking world.
Amasa Leland Stanford was born March 9, 1824 in Waterville, New York. In school, he originally studied law and was going to be an attorney. Leland Stanford was in Wisconsin, but he left after the gold rush had started and moved to California in 1852. After moving to California in 1852, Stanford opened a general store to supply miners in the gold rush. He was surprisingly successful, making a small fortune. In the 1860s, he ran for governor of California and won. He used his money and his political power to be a co-founder of the Central Pacific Railroad Company, joining fellow gold rush merchants Cosby Huntington, Mark Hopkins, and Charles Crocker to form the Big Four, CPRR co-founders. He was responsible for building part of the railroad called the Transcontinental that connected the West to the East. He hammered in the final nail to complete it. His political connections helped the company sustain their monopoly on all the railroads in the West. He served as president of the railroad company and later participated in the U.S. Senate, both positions he held until death. John D. Rockefeller donated to a lot of places. However, the most successful place that he donated to was Rockefeller University. He single-handedly funded the school for 55 years. He also paid off Carnegie, so the university be the only science research focusing in the field of medicine. We talked to Carol Ellen Mohlberg about her views on the Rockefeller University and John D. Rockefeller. Do you feel that when John D. Rockefeller donated money to a science lab, it was for personal reasons, like research for himself, or was it just for like people to get research for everyone else and like a selfless act?
It was selfless in the sense that he wanted to expand the world of knowing about infectious diseases. But the personal reason, as you probably know, his grandson in Chicago died of scarlet fever. And that was very upsetting because he was such a young child and nobody knew anything about scarlet fever. So this was, the selfless part was that he wanted people to know more and to be able to cure it and to find the cause of it, which they did.
Andrew Carnegie is considered the father of philanthropy. He spent his early years building a large fortune of $475 million. During his lifetime in steel, he crushed all unions that formed against his business. The most famous union he crushed was the Homestead Union in 1892. A combination of forces, which included a private army, state militia, eventually the strikers ran out of supplies and went back to work. At the age of 65, he sold his company to J.P. Morgan for $480 million. After that, he devoted his life to giving money away. In 1905, he founded the Carnegie Foundation to provide pensions for teachers. In addition, he donated over $50 million to build 2,509 libraries around the world. Carnegie has several buildings named after him, like Carnegie Mellon. The Pittsburgh Steelers are named after the U.S. Steel. By the time he died in 1919, he donated $35 million, more than 90% of his wealth.
Cornelius Vanderbilt died as a very rich man. When he died, his son William Henry Vanderbilt II inherited the empire. Most people believe that what Vanderbilt is reminded for would look a lot better if his son that inherited the business knew how to make better business decisions. The legacy that is most impactful is the contributions he made to the industrial America. The industrial America was when the United States emerged as an industrial giant from 1876 to 1900. Vanderbilt would never settle for less than what he offered and made sure that he was the best.
Leland Stanford doesn't have the biggest name of the robber barons. He was responsible for finishing the Transcontinental Railroad. He hammered in the final nail to complete it. He is the most known for his elite university that he founded that is named after his son that died early. The university is known as Stanford University. The university was only created so that people would only remember his son, but other sources say that it was a cover-up so people would like him better. He used his political connections to help his company survive, so it doesn't seem unlikely that he did that.